Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. So the NFL MVP race is probably one of the most exciting things that the league has to offer around this time of year, other than the teams that are, playoff bound or fighting for a playoff spot. But the MVP debate and the race starts to heat up. And I think this year is one of the years where it's been tighter and more unexpected than others, and I think that's what makes it kind of interesting and fun, and there's just so much to debate. And I'll just preface this really early. We're not going to talk about a guy named Christian McCaffrey who has absolutely balled out this year. We're all going to concede the fantasy MVP award to him because he's been unbelievable for your fantasy teams, but we're not going to talk about him in this segment because the NFL candidacy for league MVP has to do a lot with team success. And unfortunately, the Panthers aren't exactly, taking really control of their division at this point, let alone in the playoff race. So that's why Christian McCaffrey's not in strong consideration, in our opinions. And we're going to talk about some guys that are leading their teams to winning records and potentially playoff spots. So we're going to kick it off here with Mark's take. Mark, I know you got a good one. You probably have our favorite, but I want you to go and run with it and give us your best case for Mr. Lamar Jackson.
All right. So before I get into this, is this just going to be like a full-blown dissertation with like every single point I have to make, or am I going to be stopping to let you guys interject? Because once I get going, I'm like a Mack truck.
What? Get going. I want picture you're at like you're up on a podium in front of thousands of people and you're giving a monologue.
Okay. Well, in that case, now I would just like to introduce y'all to the man, the myth, the legend, the MVP front runner. And if anyone else got something different to say about that, come see me. To quote the great poet Mark Ingram.
He's right outside the arena.
So first off,
all right,
I'm going to kick it off with the stepping stone that we were all on before the season, and those were the power rankings leading up to week 1. So most analysts would have had the Ravens pegged at about 11th and 12th, and I saw about as low as 18th. So in the time since then, Lamar Jackson has been the pedestal. He has been the reason that they have skyrocketed to, many are saying first, many are saying second, but it's almost unanimous that they are first or second. So just power rankings alone, I believe that it is due to Lamar Jackson that the team was able to climb so high and become an almost unstoppable team, especially recently. And now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is his ability as a rusher. And the reason I do this first before passing is because he is seriously breaking records, and we're only leading into week 12 right now. So to look at his stat line, he is on 115 attempts. He has 788 rush yards and 6 touchdowns. If he were a running back in the NFL, he would be the RB13, and he is a quarterback. Granted, this is the team that has the most rushing attempts with 358, so they're the most rushing team in the NFL. Obviously, having Mark Ingram helps a lot, and I love how healthy he has stayed and how amazing he has been. Another thing is his elusiveness. Let's get serious here. The guy is untouchable. Anytime that there's a defender within a yard of him, he makes them miss, and he is the best at that in the league of any player. He has 7 consecutive 60-plus rush yards right now. 60-plus yards in one game, thus breaking Michael Vick's record. In his 2 seasons, he has 1,483 rush yards, thus breaking Cam Newton's record. So that's what I have to say about Lamar the rusher. But wait, he's a quarterback. Yes, I know, exactly. So carrying forth, I'll take a look at his passer stats, which every single person was down on him before the start of this season. There wasn't an analyst out there saying high praise about Lamar's throwing arm. So let's take a look at his numbers this year. So they are last in the league in pass attempts, Yet he still has 2 games where he posted perfect passer ratings in the same season. Not a lot of people doing that these days, right? He is up from 58% completion to 66, which is an enormous boost for what everyone would consider a run-first quarterback. He has 19 touchdown passes this year. In total last year, he had 6. But not only this, he is making it work with no big names. He has a rookie as his wide receiver 1. He has Mark Andrews, who is a phenomenal possible Pro Bowl tight end, yet very, very young. And Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst. Willie Snead, you're not going to hear about this guy. He's just making it work with whoever is on the field with him. And it helps that he does have some speed, but he is at the helm, and he is the reason why. So my last bid here, and this has to do a little more with our listeners, is his fantasy output. He is number 1 in all of fantasy. His rushing alone has him at RB13 in fantasy points. And let's not forget that he broke one of the most unstoppable forces in the 2019 fantasy season, and that is the New England defense. He put up 28.6 fantasy points against them and also gave them their first loss. So that, my friends and listeners, is why Lamar Jackson will win the MVP this year.
Well done, Marky. Well done.
Testify.
It is hard to battle against that. And the only narrative that I can think of is how he finishes the season. And that's what Scott touched on earlier as well, is stumbling over maybe some weaker opponents as we go forward, really showing that he's human and not this superhuman fantasy output guy we've seen so far. Do I see that coming? That's hard for me to. Maybe not. I'm a Lamar believer. We argued about Lamar versus Josh Allen earlier this offseason. I did land on the Lamar side. He's a lot of fun to watch, and that's going to be a big reason why he wins the MVP. Scotty, what do you think about Lamar, and do you think he's actually going to win?
Oh, it's going to be neck and neck this year. And obviously the gentleman that I've selected and I'm about to talk about, I do think has a very, very good chance. But really, for me, it comes down to these last few weeks of the regular season. Mm-hmm. Because right now, if I had to pick one, how do you say no to Lamar? Like, he just destroyed New England. Things that were supposed to be undoable, he has done. And done it with flash. He looks like Michael Vick. But it's a long season, and guys like Russell Wilson have made a career out of doing this consistently for years. So far, Lamar has done it for over half a season, really. And it's incredibly impressive. But yep. I do think that time will tell, and if he really falls off in the last few weeks, I think it hands it over to Wilson. That's my thoughts.
They've got a tough schedule coming up, and this is going to be the make or break. They play the Rams, they play the 49ers, and they play the Bills. And if they get a couple losses in there, I think that's going to really affect his race. But Scotty, go ahead on your Russell Wilson take.
Now, when Mark was talking about Lamar Jackson, he referred to him as kind of like a fantasy robot. I'm going to make a case for an actual robot. That actual robot is the king of efficiency, Mr. Russell Wilson. Now, I feel all our viewers know Russell, and everyone knows he's one of the highest caliber quarterbacks in the league. But this man has never actually won the MVP award. And I believe that this season is finally his time. To begin my pitch for why he should be this year's MVP, I want to take it back to the start of the season, even on this very program, where we debated quarterback rankings. And it was generally unanimous that we all said this season was a season that Russell Wilson, from both a fantasy perspective and real-world football perspective, would decline as a quarterback. Wasn't necessarily that he would be a worse player, but the situation that he now inherited was just not the same. Doug Baldwin retiring. Let's take it back to the actual draft special we did. DK Metcalf, word came out that he was going to have knee surgery. right around week 1. Like, it looked messy. Let's fast forward to where we are now. Seattle is 8-2. They are 8-2 with a defense that ranks 24th in yards allowed and 23rd in points allowed. So he went into the season with just one proven veteran wide receiver in Tyler Lockett, who at most is usually known as a very, very efficient utility player. I don't think anyone would call him your, lock WR1 before this year. And you had the needing surgery rookie of DK Metcalf. He lost Will Dissly early in the season, which was his real threat at tight end. And with each of these things, it became more and more focused on Russell making it work. So what did he do? Well, Russell has 5 game-winning drives this season alone and 4 fourth-quarter comebacks. Now, that's the most in the NFL, and in each case, it's 2 more than any other quarterback in the league, other than Buffalo's Josh Allen. So his stats, godly, really. He has over 2,700 yards with last week's bye week. He has 23 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Those numbers are just so efficient. And when I come down to the main thing about why he should win the most valuable player, it's because I honestly believe with the way that Seattle's running game this year has taken a step back from the machine it was last year. Chris Carson, he's been great. Rashad Penny, non-existent. The whole 3-headed monster idea that they had last year that worked so well, it really hasn't come to fruition this year, which has just consistently put more pressure on Wilson to find a way to win the game, and he has. And I truly believe for the rest of the regular season, that trend is going to continue. So when I talk about the actual award of most valuable player, I think the steady guiding hand of a robotic-like efficient Russell Wilson is the reason that Seattle is in their current situation and will make a real run at the division title. I think he is the most valuable because without him, there is no way they would have orchestrated these come-from-behind victories or won these close games like when they bested San Francisco. So he is my pick for this year's MVP race, and it is because consistency week in and week out is the single most valuable thing in football. And Lamar Jackson is the shiniest, most exciting thing in the league by far. But consistency is what wins you championships.
Well put,
yeah,
Scotty.
Yeah, you make a good point, and he is performing really well. And you're right, he was overtaken by Lamar on his bye week, which does bode well for your argument. And it was really about that San Francisco game and everything that happened. That was an absolute crazy finish to the game, and that really catapulted him up a lot of people's rankings. I mean, we knew he was good, we knew he was efficient, but that game in prime time was amazing. It was one of the best football games I've seen in a long time. So it's interesting, Scott, and it's surprising that he hasn't won an MVP title yet. And I think the big thing of going against him might be he's old news. We know who Russell Wilson is. We know he's efficient. And if their defense gets better, maybe that's a knock on him. They play a lot in prime time coming up. And if they stumble and lose, that is going to be in the public eye.
Well, and that's what I think makes this particular year's MVP race so exciting, because there is a lot of primetime games coming up down the stretch here. And because things are so neck and neck with everyone that we're mentioning in this episode, we're literally going to watch it play out week by week. It will probably come down to the last few games of who makes the big performance when it matters the most, probably in prime time. So it's a really exciting time to be having this debate.
Yep. I'm excited to hear Mackenzie talk about Aaron Rodgers, one guy that we've heard a lot about.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Snap.